Akamta ubar kamta chor of Yerushalayim. The most well-known story regarding Tisha B'Av, the Beis Hamikdash, the Churban, the story of Kamta and Bar Kamta. There was a man making a lavish feast. His friend was Kamta and his enemy was Bar Kamta. His attendant went with the invitation and by mistake invited the enemy, Bar Kamta. He shows up to the feast, he sits down, and the Baal Simcha comes over. What are you doing here? And not wanting to be thrown out, he offers to pay for his meal for half of the entire feast. All of the feast. It's all rejected. And he's thrown out by the Baal Simcha. He notices, Bar Kamsa does, that the Chachamim are sitting there, and they didn't say anything. And of course we know the rest of the story. That caused Bar Kamsa to be a malshin, to inform on us, on what happened to the government. And that's why the Gemara says, Kamta ubar kamta, Charuv Yerushalayim, Tisha B'Av today, Yerushalayim, the Churban of the Beis Hamikdash, from that Maisa. Listen to a most astonishing way, a novel way, to learn up the story we just said, brought down in the name of Reb Yeshayahu Deutsch. Why is it that there's so much stress put on Bar Kamta? What about the Baal Simcha? After all, isn't he the one who told Bar Kamta, get up and leave? Why is the stress put on Bar Kamta? Rabbi Yeshayahu Deutsch tells us something that's almost beyond belief. When Bar Kamta got that invitation, he didn't know it was a mistake. He actually thought, wow, the Baal Simcha, my enemy, he's ready to appease me. He's ready to let bygones be bygones. And that made Bar Kamta happy. I'm going to respond in kind. And he attends, and he's ready to run to that mishta, that lavish feast, with such a simcha. We're going to put it behind us. Clearly that's why I got invited. And the first thing, imagine, he's going to walk in and say, we're putting it behind us. I'm here. Let's shake and move on. Let us merit nachas from each other. After all, he doesn't know it's a mistake. And then he walks in. Now the first thing he should do is go over to the Baal Simcha. If you came with the intention to be mevater, to move on, then run. But he doesn't. He sits down. The Baal Simcha comes over to Bar Kamta and says, what are you doing here? And that's when Bar Kamta realizes it was a mistake. I wasn't the one that was supposed to be invited. That's the moment he realizes it was a ta'is. Now he has one of two options. Now that you realize you were invited by mistake, either you can pick up and quietly leave, or carry through with your original intentions. Your motive was to be mevater and move on. Your intention was to say to the Baal Simcha, let bygones be bygones. Let Shalom reign supreme. What happened? Why did he abandon that approach when he found out that the other person had invited him by mistake? Instead, he takes an entirely new approach. And he turns to the Baal Simcha and says, realizing it's a mistake, instead of me leaving, I'll pay. Nope, you gotta leave. Instead of me leaving, I'll pay for half of the meal. No, get out. Instead of me leaving, I will pay tens upon tens of thousands of dollars. And to that the Baal Simcha says no. He picks him up, and Bar Kamsa is told to leave. Rabbi Yeshayahu Deutsch points out that means that Bar Kamsa was willing to give up and pay for his meal. Half the entire feast, tens of thousands of dollars the entirety, just not to say, I'm sorry? You came with those intentions. That was your motive originally. And what happened? You couldn't get out those words? You couldn't say, I'm sorry? I'm still willing to let bygones be bygones? No, when he saw that it wasn't the other person's intention, he dug his heels in and he said, I'm not being mevater. I'm not willing to let go. He would rather lose an entire fortune, lose tens upon tens of thousands of dollars, just not to have to say, I'm sorry. Those words, they won't come out of my mouth. And that, he explains, is why the Chachamim sat there quietly. Because when the Chachamim saw they were dealing with a man who couldn't be mevater, when they were dealing with a man, they realized this is a man who will give up his entire monetary fortune just not to move on. When the Chachamim saw that we're dealing with that type of person, they said, there's nothing to do. There's no way to get involved, because when you're dealing with such a person, ein ma la'asos. What do you do with such a person who displays the essence of the inability to be mevater? And that's why they sat there quietly. When a person won't be mevater and he's willing to lose everything, it's virtually hopeless. And I think today on Tisha B'Av it behooves us to ask ourselves the question, how many of us have that Bar Kamsa-esque nature within us? Bar Kamsa was a man who was willing, and he showed he was capable of supreme self-destruction. And that ultimately brought about the Churban, Yerushalayim, the Beis Hamikdash, and today Tisha B'Av. How many of us act, respond, and behave the same way? How many of us have Bar Kamsa within us? The akshonis, the stubbornness. I'd rather destroy so much in my life than say I'm sorry. How many of us simply are not able to be mevater? We won't give in, we don't let go, and we can't move on. The person who is the action, the person who is not able to be mevater, simply won't give in, won't let go, and won't move on. How many of us are like that? And we have to realize that this concept of vatronos, this inability to let bygones be bygones, it's not a rare occurrence. If we think about it, vatronos is very central to our daily existence. If we would take stock on any given day, we're probably faced with the choice, will I or won't I be mevater, multiple times. It permeates so many aspects of our daily lives without us even realizing it. And so today on Tisha B'Av we came together for this theme of vatronos to ask ourselves, we've got to strategize together. We've got to unite together and come up with a plan of action. How do we de-bar kamsa ourselves and make vatronos a reality? And make the akshonos and stubbornness a thing of the past? I think it begins with asking ourselves a question. What's at the root of the inability to be mevater? The inability to let go, to give in, to move on, to let bygones be bygones. I believe it stems from one issue. Because that person who's put in the position, he's now faced with a situation. It might be with his spouse. It might be with a sibling. It might be with his parents, a coworker, a cousin. But now he's faced with the question, I've got to be mevater? Why do I always have to be the one to be mevater? I don't like it. Why do I always have to be the one to give in? That question is essentially at the root of why people have the difficulty of removing that inability to be mevater. Why me? Let the other person give in. It's time that she say she's sorry first. Let my spouse say it. I've been waiting years to hear it from my sibling. Why should I always give in? Rav Shach, Zecher Tzadik v'Kodesh Levracha, the Gadol Hador, the Rashke Bahag of our previous generation, answers that question spot on. Rav Shach, who lived to over the age of 100, whose life spanned so many generations and who had his pulse on tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people and their issues, made the following testimony. Rav Shach said, I never saw someone who was mevater and lost. Never. And I never saw someone who wasn't mevater and gained. They never gained. Those are the words of the Gadol Hador Rav Shach, having seen and experienced and spoken with everyone. Rav Shach is telling us, when you are mevater, you win. And when you're not mevater, you lose. And Rav Shach testified, there was never an exception to the rule. Do you know what we win? A person has the ability to make one purchase. Today on Tisha B'Av, in the hundreds and thousands of locations, tens of thousands of people can make one purchase. Buy Vatronis. Inject it into your being. And you get an entire package with that purchase. You gain your Shalom Bayis. You get back your Chinuch Bonim. You have fabulous Kibbud of Eprhaim. If you think about it, Vatronis, moving on, saying I'm sorry, letting bygones be bygones, is the cornerstone of all of our relationships with the spouse, every family member, our friends, all the relatives. It's all based on and predicated on my ability or inability to be a mevater. The action, the stubborn person, he knows the truth. His life is filled with bitterness. His life is filled with depression. And he constantly suffers from so much discord. But the person who has the ability to be mevater, today hopefully we'll come together and learn with that one purchase, the entire package is now something that's not only attainable, but so sweet and enjoyable. How often does a person walk into a shul, he has yard site for his parent, and so does someone else. And all of a sudden they both start fighting. I want the Yomid, the other wants the Yomid. Each one wants the Yomid. After all, this is an aliyah for my father's neshama, tonight's the yard site. Hello? You want to do something that's an aliyah for the neshama? Be mevater. When you're mevater, you win. When you're not, you lose. Do something as an aliyah for the neshama. Daven Meir from your seat, say the Kaddish Yosem, bring Shalom to Klal Yisrael. That's an aliyah for the neshama. And there's so much at stake. Today, Tisha B'Av, if not now, then when? Earlier, when we quoted that Gemara of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, perhaps some of you were wondering, what did Kamsa do wrong? Kamsa wasn't even there. Kamsa wasn't even there. Why does the Gemara say, for Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, the destruction came about? What did Kamsa do? You know what the Marsha says? The Marsha tells us something amazing. Kamsa and Bar Kamsa were actually related. It was a father and a son. Hence the son's name was Bar Kamsa, the son of Kamsa. And now we could revisit the Gemara. You know Bar Kamsa and that inability to be mevater? That akshonis, I'll give it all up and lose it all, just not to say I'm sorry. You know why it's about Kamsa as well? Because he saw that at home. He saw that from his father. And that's why the Gemara says that Kamsa and Bar Kamsa were responsible for the Churban. Bar Kamsa, to a large degree, was who he was because his father, Kamsa, was the person that he was. And if a child grows up in a home where the parents are bickering, and shalom is always put on the back burner, and there's so much stubbornness that permeates every conversation, then there's a pretty good chance that the children will become bar kamsa-esque in nature. And that's why it says the parent was to blame as well. The parent is responsible to show vatronis. Show the child you can be the first, not the second. Being the second isn't a kunz. Be the first to say, I'm sorry. Be the first to show bygones can be bygones. Extend the greetings of shalom. Show that to the children. Few things in life, if any, cause the damage of vatronis. It rips apart families. It rips apart shuls. Communities are destroyed. Relationships are lost. And yes, people are willing, as we showed earlier, to give up an entire fortune, devastation, destruction, irreparable damage, just not to be the one who's mevater. That's called losing. And sometimes people lose their entire family. Simply stated, it's insanity. A number of years ago, I was visiting a city that I had the privilege to speak in, and the Rav came over and he asked me, there was a family going through a bitter machlokes. A father, he was an elderly man, a European Yid. And this European Jew had many sons. He got along with most of them. With one, he wasn't talking. It was a horrific machlokes. In fact, the other son started to take sides. Shalom was the furthest thing from this family. The Rav asked me as a fresh pair of eyes, could I possibly get involved? I said I'll start with the European Jew, the European Yid, the elderly grandfather. I wanted to start on a light, happy note, so I said to him, tell me about something nice, maybe a simcha recently in your family. And he told me how a little while earlier, one of his einiklach was in a Ceder party, a Ceder play, and had actually a very prominent part in the play. So I said innocently, "Nu, how good did the nachas feel? Let's talk about that." And he said, I didn't go. Out of town? Business? You weren't feeling well? No, none of those. I couldn't go. Couldn't go. You see, in that same class is another grandchild, a cousin of the one that I just spoke to you about. But this other grandchild is the son of the one that I don't talk to and that we have no relationship. So you see, I couldn't go. I couldn't be there in the same room with that part of the family that I don't speak to. It would have been way too painful. I said, really? You just missed on all that nachas? That delicious enjoyment? I was so pained, and then the man starts to cry. He says, Rabbi Shapiro, and through his tears he says, you know how many hugs I've missed? You know how many family sudas Friday night have been separate? You know how many simchas in my life have been incomplete? And the man continued to cry because he understood it was his akshonis. It was his inability to move on and say, I'm sorry, that caused him to lose things that he'll never get back. And then through my own tears, I said something very strong. Very strong. I said, you mean to tell me your machlokes is primarily over money? Last time I checked, money had a price tag. The things that you're talking to me about, the einiklach, the hugs, the bar mitzvah, a city party, haschalas gemara, there's no price tag. Those things are priceless. And you'll just give it up for something that has a price? And I looked at the man and I said to him, Mr. So-and-so, be mevater before it's too late. Because when you're mevater, you win. And when you're not, you lose. And I couldn't bear the sight of a man who was going to lose so much of his family. The destruction and the devastation, the irreparable damage is beyond description. And if not today on Tisha B'Av, then when? Today's the day that tens of thousands came together to watch the video from the Chavetz Chaim Heritage Foundation because we care. We want to make a difference. We want to make a change. And it begins by purchasing Vatronis. Give in, let go, move on, and let bygones be bygones. Because the truth is, the magnificence of Vatronis, the magnificence of the person who gets it right, the winner, is beyond compare. The beauty and sweetness of Vatronis and all of the blessings that it brings. A number of years ago, someone called and told me the following story. It involves three people, so we'll call them Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. I heard this from Levi. Levi tells me that Reuven had a palatial mansion, but the centerpiece of his mansion was a magnificent lawn. His lawn was his end-all, be-all. That's the way Reuven and his wife felt about their lawn. Shimon purchases the empty land next to it. And he's standing there one day with a number of the contractors and workers. Levi passes by and sees that Shimon is very agitated. With anxiety, he's banging on the papers. Levi goes over to Shimon, everything okay? Shimon says, look, the papers. 27 feet of his lawn. It's mine. The papers show there was a mistake. That lawn, the length of the house, it's mine. It's not his. It's got to change. At that point, Shimon, with the paper, starts to march to the home of Reuven. Levi thinks, what's going to happen? The machloikis, the feud. I know how they feel about the lawn. I know how excited Shimon is. All of a sudden, Reuven's wife answers the door. Shimon starts to repeat the words. The lawn, the papers, you see, so much of it is mine, it's not yours. And Reuven thinks quickly and he turns to, Levi. Levi thinks quickly and he turns to Reuven's wife and he says, you know what, I have an idea. Be mevater. Just move on. You could start looking into, is he right, are you right, who's wrong, what's the reality? Is it yours and he's wrong, are the papers incorrect? Don't do it. It's just not worth it. And I have an idea. When you're mevater, tell yourself, Levi says, I know you have a daughter that's had a really difficult time in the Parsha of Shidduch in the last few years. Why not offer a tefillah? I'll be mevater, and please read B'nai Shalom, and that's chus. Let my daughter merit that long-awaited shidduch. Somehow his words penetrated to the heart of Reuven's wife, and she says, you're right. Turns to Shimon and says, okay, I believe the papers, let's move on, and that's the way it'll be. And then she offers that tefillah after she displayed such magnificent vatronos. Levi tells me less than 2 hours later, the phone rang. Reuven and his wife pick up the phone and it's a shadchan. I know there was a boy that you looked into a few years ago and for one reason or another, you wanted it very much, but it just didn't work out. The shadchan says to Reuven's wife, you're not going to believe this, but about an hour and a half ago, the shadchan called. The boy's interested in the shidduch. And a few weeks later, that young couple celebrated their engagement. Levi naturally was invited to the l'chaim and the vart. After all, he was partly the shadchan. And I heard that story from Levi. So now we have a couple, Reuven and his wife, who enjoy the nachas and shalom bayis of a couple, who have the ability to enjoy the Ceder party, Hascholas Gemara, and the hugs of Einiklach. Why? Because when you're mevater, you win. And when you're not, you lose. It's not easy. I know we're listening, and I know that I'm telling myself, I know the destruction, and I know what's at stake. I know what can be gained. But it's not easy. It's so hard. That's right. Moshe Rabbeinu, there are 3 times that you find in the Torah that when something was told to him, he said, it's hard, it's difficult. He wanted to be shown that item 3 times. What were they? The menorah, the shekel, and the moon, ha-chodesh. What's the first letter of those three words? Menorah is a mem, shekel's a shin, ha-chodesh is a hey, mem shin hey, Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu's name stems from the things in life that are difficult. They're not so easy. Your essence is not how you do with the things that are second nature to you, the things that are so easy. You know what your name is? You know what your essence is? Like Moshe, Mem Shin Hey. How do you do when things are difficult? Vatronis is difficult. And the first thing is to recognize that I can overcome the challenge. And when I overcome the difficulty, I've tapped into who I truly am, my essence. How sweet is it to be mevater? People travel the entire world. People who are bitter, who are depressed, who are resentful. They travel the whole world looking for quality of life. They'll try this, they'll try that, they'll spend billions of dollars around the world. You know what? And all the people will tell you the same thing. The best medicine, the greatest medicine and remedy to remove the bitterness, the depression, the resentment, and the discord, become a person of Atronos. Because when you do, when you become that person of Atronos, the one who's not so stubborn, the one who can move on and let bygones be bygones, it's physically the best medicine, bar none. Your quality of life. Physically, you're happier, you're healthier, and you're a more content person. You've restored your tranquility. You've restored your peace of mind. That's the sweetness of Atronos. You're the happy, healthy person. But there's more. When that person has mastered the art of Atronos, when we leave the Tisha B'Av video today not saying, oh, I'm so happy she heard the topic because she really needs to learn. I hope he goes to the video today because he really needs to hear it. Then you missed it. This is a topic about me. It's a topic about you and you. It's a topic about all of us around the world. We can change the world by becoming Vatronim. And we can. It's hard, but there's so much to win. Not only the physical health. Think for a moment about our spiritual health. Our spiritual health, the barometer of who a person is or isn't. The litmus test of all your midos is based on Vatronos. Your ability to be a Baal Chesed, your ability to exude Avas Yisrael, your ability to have Anivus, your ability to be Naisei Ba'olam Chaveiroi, all of the midos stem from how much a mevater are you? How much are you really able to let go, move on, give in? Because when you get that right, then you truly excel in all midos, the chesed, avas yisrael, the naisei ba'ol, the anivus. Simply stated, your vatronis defines who you are, your spiritual barometer, and your midos. But there's more. Besides the fact that I've restored the physical health. Now that we've also mentioned the spiritual aspect, how it's the centrality of my ruchnius life, you want to hear perhaps the sweetest reason? Perhaps the biggest reason to become that mevater? The most wonderful reason of all. You become like the Rabino Shalom. You are following in the ways of the Rabino Shalom. One can take a look at the Taimar Devaira. The Taimar Devaira explains that when a person describing the midos of the Rabino Shalom, Mikel Kamaycha, the Taimar Devaira says that when a person sins and does an Aveira, that koyach he got from the Rabino Shalom. He's taking the gifts the Rabino Shalom gave him and using it to do an Aveira. And yet, you know what the Rabino Shalom does? He's mevater. He doesn't punish right away. He says, I'll give a chance. I'll let you do tshuva. Essentially, the Timer Tzvayr is telling us the Rabino Shalaylam, by giving us the ability to do tshuva and not punishing right away, is the biggest mevater of all. And if we leave the video today, and we will tap into that being mevater, we've tapped into greatness. We have fulfilled the halachta b'drachav. We have essentially gone in the ways of the Rabino Shalaylam. And there you have just some of the magnificence of the one who says, Akshonis is gone and Vatronis is in. Because I don't want to lose. I want to win. I want to be there in the relationships. I want to have the peace of mind. I want to have the tranquility. I want to have the nachas. And yes, I want to tap into the greatness. If the Rabino Shalaylam is the biggest mavater of all, then I can do it as well. A number of years ago, when I finished speaking in a particular city, I had spoken about Vatronis. And I had on my mind, and I said over that story I told you a little while ago about the Europeische Yid. I don't know who cried more, he or I, when I begged him, just be mevater before it's too late. And when I finished, everybody left the room, but there was an elderly man from the tri-state area who remained behind. I went over, he was the only person left in the room. I asked him, are you okay? He said, yes. He said, Rabbi Shapiro, can you sit down for a few minutes? And I did, and he said, your words, that story, that spoke to my heart. He said, let me tell you why. I could have been that man. I could have been that person, but Baruch Hashem, I wasn't. He says, I also have a number of children. And there's one child with whom I hadn't spoken for years, and I would simply not walk into their home. It was beyond the point of I was right and they were wrong, or I was wrong and they were right. It just got out of hand. But nobody was willing to give in. And I was that man. I was just like him. And one day someone came over to me and said, it doesn't make a difference. Does it really make a difference who's right and who's wrong? What makes a difference is that when you're mevater, you win, and when you're not, you lose. And there was a person who cared enough about me and said, please, don't lose more. Give in. He says, Rabbi Shapiro, I took that person's advice and I restored shalom with that child and ultimately through the entire family. The peace was back again. I was whole. A little while later, a grandson from that child, a son of that child, who went from yeshiva to yeshiva, who didn't have much success in learning, was able to find the chavrusa with whom he worked for a little bit of time, actually a while, and he successfully finished Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. And he made a siyum and a suda, a mishteh. We opened up this talk with a mishteh party, and we're closing with a mishteh party. He said, it was Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. I was invited, and because I was mevater, it was the first time that I went into that child's home. And I sat through the siyum, and I sat through the suda, and I sat through the dancing. And I witnessed the priceless nachas, and I turned to the person sitting next to me, who was the person who got me to be mevater, and said, you mean I would have lost this? You mean I would have missed this? I would have given all this up. That would have been insane. Because I took your advice and I was mevater, I see I truly won. And this is one of the greatest nights of my life. A little while later, I wanted to stay in touch and to follow up about the man and his family. And I found out that the next time he went into that child's home was because that Einokel who made the siyum on Shisha Sidrei Mishnah became a chassan. And so he attended the l'chaim and the vart on his next visit to the home. And then he was privileged to be at the chasana. And a little while later, unfortunately, that man was nifter. But not before he won. Not before he took the advice to become a vatran and to say, it doesn't make a difference who's right and who's wrong. Not before he was able to sit by the Einikel at the Siyum and the Sud and the Simcha and the L'chaim and the Chasana. He took the words to heart, and before he was too late, he won. He became a mevater. The Rabino Shalom should give us the kayach. Today, Tisha B'Av. So many of us have to make sure we leave here today, make the one purchase, become the vatran, become that person who has the ability to let go, to give in, to move on, to let bygones be bygones. Gain the physical health, the spiritual health, tap into the greatness of the Rabino Shalom. You can do it. We can do it. It's the most magnificent and sweetest thing of all. And we ask the Rabino Shalom, when he sees that tens upon tens of thousands leave today, the Chavetz Chaim Heritage Foundation Tisha B'Av event, and the Rabino Shalom says, you are mevater. You got it right. Let the Rabino Shalom say, just like it was the inability to be mevater, the inability to say I'm sorry that brought about the churban, let it be the ability to be mevater and to move on and to make shalom reign supreme throughout the world, rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, the Bayis Hashlishi, b'mheira and b'yameinu. Amen.
Come